what even is vinegar? I mean, I know it literally means sour wine. So when I open up a bottle of wine, but I don't drink all of it, and then it starts to taste kind of sour after a few days, is that vinegar? Well, kinda. At least it's the start of vinegar. That is exactly what happened a few years back to the author of this book, Vinegar, the Eternal Condiment by Reggie Smith. Here he is. I had a coworker that had introduced me to home brewing, and so I thought I could make a maple wine from maple syrup, and it tasted absolutely horrible. And so I left it on my counter over Christmas vacation. And when I came back, there was a layer on top of it, a gelatinous layer. And looking up, I realized it was a mother of vinegar. Smith's little discovery there was basically the same one made by ancient Babylonians some 5,000 years previously, and then by ancient Egyptians, Chinese, Greeks. Basically everybody figured this out because it's simply inevitable. You make some kind of sweet drink, maybe a fruit juice or a wort made from grain, and then as it kind of sits around, yeasts that are ubiquitous in the environment come in here and they eat some of the sugars and they basically poop out alcohol. You have a taste and you notice that it still tastes pretty delicious and it makes you feel funny, which you really like, so you keep it around. But then as it continues to sit, a different class of microorganism from the environment settles in here, a class of bacteria known as acetobacters. And they eat some of the alcohol and then basically poop out acetic acid. And if they're really happy, they decide to settle down and build themselves a little house. This is called the mother. Mother of vinegar is basically a big party of bacteria on the top of your wine or alcohol. The acetic acid bacteria form together and they begin producing cellulose, which is the same compound that makes leaves, grass, to provide like an environment for themselves. That helps them to get air from the environment, which they need to make vinegar, as well as contact the alcohol in the brew, which they need to make vinegar as well. And if you're an ancient Babylonian, you maybe push this creepy layer aside to get yourself a swig of your drink that makes you feel funny. You think, this tastes really sour now, and it's not making me feel funny anymore. This sucks. But I've got some bland hunk of beast over here, or maybe one that tastes kind of off. I wonder if I could make it taste better by pouring on some of my sour juice. And indeed, it does taste good. And a few more happy accidents later, you realize that if you leave your food in your sour juice and seal it away from air, your food doesn't spoil. You've pickled it in a liquid that's too acidic for other microbial life to survive. And as a result, you survive through the lean times when there isn't much food growing. You are fruitful and multiply, and you are able to pass your love of sour juice on to your children, and thus vinegar conquers the world, just as it conquered Reggie Smith's world. Remember that maple wine vinegar that he made accidentally? I figure, hey, I'll just let it go, better than dumping it. And 2 months later, I had a very good tasting maple vinegar. So I figure, hey, here's something I am good at. Quite good, actually. So much so that he started his own company here, Supreme Vinegar, just outside Philadelphia. He makes all kinds of boutique vinegars and also supplies mother of vinegar to other vinegar makers. Instead of just waiting around for acetobacters in the environment to colonize your alcohol, it's much faster to just drop in a hunk of mother. Why do they call it mother? I am your mother. Mother of vinegar was not known to be made from bacteria until the late 19th century from Louis Pasteur. Before that, they didn't know what it was. They guessed it was alive, but they called it a mother because they knew that if they transfer that mother from one vat of wine to another, you could start another vinegar fermentation. Another thing that ancient people figured out through experimentation is that at some point in the vinegar making process, you have to stop. That is, you have to seal off the vinegar from the oxygen that the acetobacters need. If it's left open to air, the bacteria will use up any alcohol left in the vinegar, and once that's gone, they don't just die. They start eating the vinegar itself, breaking it down until you only have water left. And so over time, that'll weaken the vinegar until it's non-usable or maybe even spoils. You can see Smith here doing various chemical tests to see if his vinegar is ready to seal off. He's measuring the pH, trying to get the acetic acid content to 5, 6, maybe 7% by volume. Above 7%, it'll burn your mouth pretty badly. So when the numbers are looking good, the vinegar maker seals their product off from the air in a barrel or a bottle or something, and that's when the flavor really starts to develop as it ages for months or even years, as in the case of perhaps the most celebrated vinegar in the world, balsamic from Italy. Basically a sour syrup. They called it balsamico because it reminded them of a balsam. That is a resin taken from various plants and used to make perfumes, cosmetics, or medicines, balms. They weren't saying this vinegar longer is a balm, but rather it's like a balm. Just like nobody is saying that this coffee literally contains chocolate and hazelnut, but rather it's reminiscent of those things. And I'm quite enjoying it thanks to the sponsor of this video, Trade Coffee, whom I'll now briefly thank. Trade is a way for you to discover new coffees from the top roasters. You go online and take their quiz. I'm feeling intermediate these days. You tell them how you make your coffee, what kind of roast you're like, I defer to you. What kind of flavors do you like, etc. And they brew you up a match. Choose your delivery frequency and your matches will start showing up right on your doorstep fresh from the roaster. This one is produced by an all-women co-op of growers in Honduras, and it sure is chocolatey and hazelnutty. Just like vinegar, it's amazing how many different flavors you can get by producing coffee in slightly different ways. You go back online and rate the coffee you got, and the algorithm gets smarter and smarter at sending you coffees you'll love. Do us both a favor and hit the referral link below. You'll get 30% off your first bag. Free shipping included, thank you Trade. Anyways, balsamic vinegar. The first solid historical mention of this stuff goes back to 16th century Italy.
Primarily the region of Modena, where it's still, that's the primary place it's made. And balsamic vinegar, instead of using wine vinegar, it uses grape must, which is pretty much boiled down grape juice, which is then fermented to vinegar. And not only that, the most traditional balsamic vinegar, which is also very expensive, is aged over at least 12 years in successively small wooden barrels made of different woods.
Yeah, look at these barrels. No seal is 100%, so the vinegar slowly evaporates and reduces as it ages. Once a year, they would move it to a smaller barrel of different wood from which to extract different flavors. This is oak, juniper, ash, cherry, etc. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, how is this so cheap if it's made by this potentially decades-long process? Well, the stuff made by that process absolutely is not cheap. This is not that.
There's a cheaper balsamic vinegar called Balsamic Vinegar of Modena, which is pretty much grape must mixed with red wine vinegar and aged for about 60 days. And that's primarily what you get at the supermarket.
Okay, so now I think I know another thing you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, is vinegar an alcoholic beverage? I mean, it's made from wine or beer, or in the case of distilled vinegar, it's made from a distilled spirit, hooch. The hooch can't be super high alcohol, too high and no bacteria can survive in there. It's got to be watered down to maybe 10% booze, and then the acetobacters can get to work. But regardless, vinegar is always made from alcohol. Now, there are industrial vinegars, acetic acid made for industrial purposes. They can do that chemically through some significantly less wholesome processes, but in most countries you can't sell them as vinegar for food. Food-grade vinegar is always made from alcohol. And this fact has for centuries presented an interesting conundrum in the Islamic world, where intoxicants are strictly forbidden. It's a matter of scripture that the Prophet Muhammad himself loved vinegar, but to this day you can find discussions online where Muslims are debating whether and which kinds of vinegar really are halal. Oh, there's our friend Reggie chiming in. As he explains in his book, the way vinegar is historically manufactured in the Islamic world is through a process of double fermentation. The juice goes in the barrel and it doesn't come out until it's vinegar. There's no intermediate step in which you have a stable wine. The fermentation of the sugars into alcohol can overlap somewhat with the fermentation of the alcohol into acid, but at some point in the process there's going to be a lot of alcohol in the barrel, and there is going to be some amount of alcohol left in the finished vinegar.
You want to make sure the alcohol is not completely gone, but down to like between 0.2 to 0.4% alcohol by volume. That's enough alcohol to give some flavor to the vinegar, but it's not so little that the bacteria start cannibalizing the vinegar and reducing the acidity.
But now listen to me, middle schoolers who are getting ideas. Don't go raiding your parents' pantry trying to get buzzed off of vinegar. When something has less than 0.5% of alcohol in it, like this does, your body simply wouldn't be able to absorb the alcohol fast enough as you digested this stuff in order to make you intoxicated. Plus, I think if you chugged a whole bunch of this, you'd be seeing it again really soon. But while vinegar generally requires alcohol as a precursor, the process of transforming said booze can take many forms. Case in point, Reggie Smith's personal favorite anecdote from the history of vinegar. The French Navy during the 7 Years' War used vinegar to swab the decks of its ships, which meant that some procurement officer had to go out and buy vinegar for the Navy.
And the people who won the contracts, like many people who have war contracts, were not completely scrupulous. And so what they tried to do is they tried to pass off wine, and they would have their workers urinate in it to make it acidic, to pass off as vinegar to sell to the Navy. And the craziest part about this story is it actually worked because somehow that speeded fermentation.
Maybe don't try that one at home, but here's something you can try. Right back where we started, the wine that has been left open for a few days. Is it vinegar? Not quite. There are a few other chemical reactions that can make this taste sour before it really starts becoming vinegar, and that process will be delayed by a class of preservatives used in wine called sulfites. Since ancient times, winemakers have added sulfites to keep their wine from turning into vinegar. Exposed to air in an open bottle, those sulfites will slowly break down, but you can speed that process with a standard 3% drugstore solution of hydrogen peroxide, about half a teaspoon per bottle of wine. Pour it in, shake it up, and after a few minutes, the peroxide and the sulfites have basically destroyed each other. Then you gotta cut your wine with an equal part of water. Most wine on the shelf has a high enough alcohol concentration to kill bacteria. You either have to wait for some of the alcohol to evaporate off, or you can dilute it. Then you just wait for wild acetobacters to come along.
It can take a little bit longer, and sometimes can be less reliable. But wild fermentation is how vinegar was made for much of history.
But the sure bet would be to seed your wine with some mother. In my case, I've bought some apple cider vinegar with live mother in it. That's the stuff on the bottom there. Shake up the bottle to get the mother redistributed. Smith recommends about 8 ounces of this for a bottle of wine. Cover that with some breathable stuff, and a couple of weeks later, your mother is on top, and right under that is your vinegar. Keep it sealed in an airtight container in a nice dark pantry, and it can last for as long as humans have and will use vinegar to make their food safer and tastier. Vinegar, the eternal condiment. Also coffee, the eternal beverage. Thanks again to Trade for their sponsorship. Get 30% off your first bag with my link in the description. Now, has anybody ever tried... Nah.
Tell me I should not be